Hello, Bears fans.
Hey, are you all ready to get this started?
Going live.
Listener discretion is advised.
Keep your head out there. They're going to do dumb. Play our game. All right? Play hard, but stay poised.
3, gonna be savage. 2, grab your shit. 1, do it.
Let's be great. Let's be great.
Today is the first day NFL teams can use the franchise tag on players, and it is not out of the question that the Bears would utilize that distinction on defensive back Kyle Fuller.
The Bears have made some moves. Josh Sitton, and his contract has not been renewed.
I think he was solid, but he wasn't as durable as you thought he'd be. You didn't think he'd miss a game.
It looks like linebacker Jerrell Freeman will be released from the team.
Live with our own resident doctor, Draft Dr. Phil. You just heard audio from a WSCR, The Score Sports Radio, and ESPN 1000, talking about the news coming out of Hallis Hall on the Sitton and Freeman cuts earlier today. And you also heard audio from the next generation of podcast hosts, the kids of Bears Barroom. I'm BearsGrl, and yes, I agree, they do a much better cheers and hello than I do. I promise I'll keep practicing, and I've got lessons with Phil's son later this week. We've got a full show for you guys, talking all things Bears, free agency, and a special focus on one of our recent hires, our new strength and conditioning coach, Jason Lascalzo. Tonight, one of our barflies, Ross Reed, is in the house, and we'll chat with Ross later in the show. Let's start the show like we do every week with your opening rant, Phil. And I know it's all about free agency and the moves the Bears have made and will be making to their roster over the next little while. Let's have it, Doc.
Well, good evening. You got to be excited. The football season, off season, the double negative is starting, and you couldn't predict what was going to transpire. Clearly, a lot of the quote-unquote insiders have been penny pinching and trying to figure out what Ryan Pace is going to do next and be the first one to give you their supposed, from what they're hearing, their gut is telling them, and every other misleading magician talk. So, for me, I really opened the show. I'm excited because Ryan Pace picked up the bat. And I really don't use a lot of other sports as analogies, but he really did. He's picked up the bat and he's swinging it. And he's getting ready to start the game and what he's going to do in free agency. And really, it's got to start with Kyle Fuller. And I know I've been very loud, and I'm very loud on Twitter, where my presence is, obviously on this show, about the necessary need to make an extension or a control. And what that is putting the franchise tag on Kyle Fuller or getting him to understand you appreciate him and rewarding him in a fair place in regards to what other top corners are making. Now, you could throw the season beforehand out there as an argument, but for me, what matters most is what is put on tape. And if you're in a young, ascending football team and you see a Kyle Fuller becoming a clear piece of the puzzle that's setting the tone in the secondary, this isn't a guy that's going through the motions. There's been critics and analysts going back and forth on the radio and the TV network, as well as on Twitter. I see people argue about this. Let me just set this down just like I did with Jordan Howard. I almost said K. Kyle Fuller is an absolute tremendous corner. And why he is that is because he's growing in the philosophy of what Vic Fangio wants his corners to be. And if you have a homegrown talent, as we say and have said, and it's been stolen and used and echoed throughout Bearland now, but I'm going to say it again. If you have homegrown talent, you do not let it go for nothing. So the tag gives you both plays. It gives you the opportunity to control and possibly have another team that really, really loves Kyle Fuller, and there could be a player and a pick in return, or there's an agreement and an extension or a time giving you like a credit card payment to get to the point where you can reach a time frame that Kyle is fully aware that you love him, that you appreciate his work, and that you're going to reach an agreement. There is no doubt, just like the Miami Dolphins did with their talented player who I loved, and you all knew that they're understanding there's a market for that. You don't create a hole. It's 112 catches. Kyle Fuller, there's going to be a huge market because he's better than Tremaine Johnson. He's better than a lot of these corners that are out there, and the tape doesn't lie. Now, every corner has their blemishes because it's just that difficult to play that position. They have to be the elite athlete, and Kyle is that. And not only that, what he brings that other corners don't is a physicality and a willingness to put his face into somebody's chest and put them to the ground. What he did to Cam Newton, BG, and set the tone of the football. How many corners set the tone? I remember Darrell Green for the Redskins setting the tone. This kid is absolutely a Chicago Bear, just like you did with Kyle Long. You should reward those guys and don't make the same mistake that you did with Alshon Jeffrey. I don't care if Kyle wants to test the waters or not. This is a business league. It's a league where they play for pay. And when you're dealing with money issues, you have to let people know that they're important and that you're going to do everything in your power to keep them. Or, unfortunately, we have to put the cap on you because we don't want to lose you. You need to make sure that's worded correctly and known by that player. So Kyle Fuller, to me, they have days to do this. It's going to get done. If Pace, worst case scenario, allows this guy on the open market, I have my doubts about him as a general manager when it comes to free agent and personnel decision, because it makes no sense with the amount of cap savings that you have today and already space that you have and are going to have. You can control this player and not worry about a goddamn blogger's scared tactic of value. Okay? Value in the player. Don't create the hole in the team. When it comes to Josh Sitton, as we transition to him, this is a guy that's overweight. And really, when I look at the scheme, he gets by with sheer talent in regards to physicality and understanding the plays. But he really, was a descending football player on tape. I looked at it, and Shane Marsaw could tell you, I watch offensive line play. I love it. I live for that. I could sit with anybody, any coach, and we can go through it and watch it. And when I watched Sitton, I saw a guy that was just okay. I think it was Tom Waddle who said that. I didn't hear the interview, but in the opener that Aldo put together, I agree with Tom. He's okay. And what is your goal as a franchise? It's not to worry so much about what you're paying. It's about getting players that are good and great. And I thought when I watched tape of 2016, Eric Kush was a better guard on what you're going to do philosophy-wise in running those zone schemes and that run-pass option, read, and zone and power plays that you want. I thought Josh Sitton held you back. There's no reason any Bear fan should be panicked or worried about the offensive line. You have a Cush coming back. You have a lot of potential in regards to the draft. Josh Morgan put on a redshirt year. We all knew what it was. And that kid, I loves coming out. There's plenty of me talking about him after the draft and when he was picked. I just think the Bears fans see names, you start to panic. They're clearing cap space. They're clearing the pathway for what we know Jordan Howard to be, the best football player on the roster. So you need to build on that. I thought Sitton was holding this football team back in regards to what they're going to do philosophically with a Matt Nagy coming in here. Sitton looks more of like a mauler that he would fit down in New Orleans with trying to protect Drew Brees in that pocket. He could squat and control, but he couldn't reach and get to the next level and get down the field on a safety and run these screen plays and hustle out there, not at the weight that he was carrying and not with the back issues that he had. I know I've talked about Kyle Long. I mean, you talk about the perfect fit in regards to wherever they want to play him because of his athletic ability. Cody Whitehair. Shout out to Olin Kreutz tonight, doubling down on Draft Dr. Phil. Without a doubt, how many hours we spent on this. Guy's a center. That's his best position. I'm talking about Whitehair. Get him in there, locked in. Now you know where you're filling gaps, where you're going to attack in free agency, because you're not going to have Bradley Soule and Tom Compton playing guard with Matt Nagy and Harry Eiston's offense. It's just not going to happen. So there's no need to panic. If Harry thought that Sitton was somebody that needed to stay a year and pass the baton to another player and was a fit, then he'd be staying here at the cost to keep him. It wasn't, you're not breaking the bank on $8 million. You just gave $18 million to a giraffe. They're not worried about that. So Bear fans, we're going to move forward. I think these things are great things moving forward. I think hopefully in the next week they give you something on Kyle Fuller and don't wait to the last minute. And hopefully they come to an agreement. But there's little doubt in my mind that the right thing to do is to tag and extend. There's no option of letting him get to the open market. If they can't come to agreement, you got to tag.
So, Phil, I want to stay on Fuller just a bit longer because the barroom chat room is all over the place on Fuller. Two things. We had a poll earlier today on Bears Barroom on Twitter where we asked Barflies what we should do about Kyle Fuller. And the options were work out a deal, exclusive franchise tag, other tag options, and let him test the market. And with 95 votes, 52% have asked us to have a deal worked out with Fuller. 27% are looking for that exclusive franchise tag. 15% would be comfortable with any other tag, and 6% actually want to let him test the market. There's an article out by Dan Pompei today where he gave us all four options and his breakdown on that. Starting today, Pace will have 2 weeks to pull a tag on Fuller. The franchise tag would prevent Fuller from signing elsewhere and guarantee him a one-year salary in the vicinity of $15.2 million. A transition tag would guarantee him around $13 million. Signing him to a long-term contract is another option, and telling him thanks for the time, see you later, is our last option. Nikki Kurtz had a question for you. What do you think Fuller has done except for the last year and this year, his contract season?
Well, he came in here and had to switch defensive coordinators and philosophies. You went through a whole 2 coaching changes, and you look at where they're going in regards to this defense. It was ascending. You have 2 young, really strong safeties that you haven't had before. And you have a chess piece here in Kyle Fuller that, he was injured. How we're going to base our trust in John Fox needs to come to the forefront. How much do you trust in John Fox and how Kyle Fuller was treated and how he was dealt with in regards to his rehabilitation? Apparently that summer he He hung out with Vic Fangio a lot. They went fishing. They talked. There was a clear-cut focus on this football player. I remember us doing the show with Lauren Cox, and Shane admitted, and I'm not pointing fingers at Shane. You all know he didn't even think he was going to make the 53 last year because of the turmoil. But really behind the scenes, there was a rekindling of a relationship. And in a league that is, what have you done for me lately? That's all you can assess. So for me, I see a guy that fits the system, that is a tone setter, that you don't really have a lot of corners that could come in here and set the tone. I'll give you guys homework in the chat room to give some names of other NFL players, because look at this kid in Kansas City, Peterson, that they're trying to trade because he wants contact like Aaron Lemming wants a real source. It's not happening. So I look at Kyle Fuller and I see a football player that lives for contact, will lock down a player, is feeling comfortable in the system, and has a homegrown talent that is a known commodity to this team. And really, he was drafted to play here. Reward your own. What kind of message does that send with a new coaching staff controlling the locker room to the rest of the team? It sends a great message. And I think you got to reward your own. I think the tape doesn't lie. It's not cliche. It is reality when it comes to this corner. Now, is he a perfect corner? No. But in real talk, just like in Adrian Amos, I think Arkish brought him up like, he's only got one interception. He can't change a game. I'm watching tape, and his presence changes games. That one interception changed the game. What he's doing on the football field changes the game. I see Kyle Fuller, and granted, this is a 5-win football team. We know why. Coaching. I've said it 100 times. And I feel like you don't make a hole on a football team. Tell me who's a better corner on the market that's going to come in here and make this team a great football team. The corner, my number one corner in the draft, BG, Josh Jackson. Absolutely love this football player. Is he going to come in and be better than Kyle Fuller? That's how I assess this football team, because any team and anybody, I'm taking our super producer's words here, the history says teams can flip it around, go from the bottom to the top, and win the division. The Chicago Bears, even John Fox was even saying this in interviews today. The Chicago Bears are closer than people think. There's a lot of people out there that I'm seeing on Twitter, on national media, ESPN, NFL Network, that don't know diddly about the Bears and about football, period. But they're talking football. This is the society we live in today in fantasy land. Fantasy football. You have a guy in Chicago saying Jordan Howard is an elite. You have a guy in Chicago that's telling you that Kyle Fuller can't tackle. This stuff isn't real, but it's said and it's believed. And unfortunately, people are going to believe that stuff unless they tune in here to the shows at Bears Barroom Radio Network. I'm not going to give you any BS. If a guy stinks like Mike Burton and Mike Glennon and any other Mike got to get rid of him. I look at things from the tape first, then we'll talk about it, and then we'll make highlights from that. But the tape doesn't lie, and Kyle Fuller absolutely stays. No doubt about it. It's not even a question to me. If I was the coach of this football team, I know Vic Fangio is in Pace's office saying, no, we got to keep this guy. It's essential. It really is.
So talking about players to cut, I've been frantically waiting to hear that Glennon's been cut, and I've already got my giraffe party to celebrate. But we also heard today that linebacker Jerrell Freeman has been cut. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it was a surprise to anyone, given that he missed 19 of the 32 games and had 2 suspensions during his 2 years with the Bears. Between him and Sitton, we've got about $10 million cleared in cap space. And based on the tweet that Jonathan Wood shared earlier tonight, there's about $51 million that they're projecting towards for free agency. Where do you think the Bears should go next? And what do you think they're actually going to do?
They need to obviously work the situation with Fuller. And as far as looking at your own free agents and what they should, obviously Mike Glennon needs to be tossed to the curb. Shout out to John Wood. The $11.5 million savings you gain from Mike Glennon could go to the next receiver, the next offensive guard that you're going to sign and bring in here, or the next tight end that you have your eye on, a Trey Burton, or whatever it is. But obviously you cut Sitton. Let me just say Freeman, the 3.5. Freeman, to me, honestly, the football player was tremendous. The situations on and off the football field aren't. So anybody questioning that move or shouting their sources in regards to it need to check themselves, because that was like a slam dunk. There was just no way that after he's done it twice that you could forgive that and move forward with him on your football team. It's not okay. And then when you look at the other guys on the list that Jonathan Wood put together, which I appreciate, John. For me, Pernell McPhee and that $7.1 million that you're going to save is there. I'm keeping Deion Sims in camp. I want to see what he can transition. Could they cut him? Absolutely, and save 5.7 if Nagy has other plans. Willie Young, I'm keeping and bringing him to camp. You're low on pass rushers. You got to get rid of McPhee. He's always hurt. He's running on a bum wheel. But we've seen Willie play through injury, be a team leader, and really you have a new coaching staff. So that's kind of an iffy situation if there was a new defensive coordinator. But Vic Fangio's here, knows Willie well, and I know Willie really would like to be at another team, probably running a 4-3 scheme. So the sides could come to an agreement, and all of a sudden Willie's playing with the Falcons down in Atlanta, for God's sake. But for me, I would bring him back. And Marcus Cooper with that $4.5 million, where are you going in regards to, Fuller and a Prince Amukamara? Do you want to get them back? Can you save? I can understand. But really, I know other analysts and other people, I don't do one and done. I want to see proper coaching given to these football players. And I mean the head coach. I don't mean Vic Fangio only. I mean the head coach and the personnel decisions to be appropriate for these football players, like a Marcus Cooper and even a Quentin Demps. It's $3.3 million. Why not bring him to camp? You've had a history of injuries at the position. Quentin Demps hadn't been injured until last year, but you really ended up being a positive for the Bears because you got to see the real deal and Famous Amos get out there. So bring him back. Marcus Wheaton, to me, I honestly don't know about that football player. He's the screwball in my whole presence, because the $5 million right there, the 7.9 you saved, the 3.5, Purnell's going to give you another 7. Now you've already been able to tag Fuller and control whatever money, and it becomes a wash. So all these people worrying about money, I just don't. It's about getting talent. For me, Wheaton, he could possibly be something. I don't know, because the coaching was so poor. So I don't throw people out on the street unless I see just sheer, complete Mike Glennon, Mike Burton level of talent. That's how I'd break this down. Wheaton would be a possibility to return. That would be a total personality in the locker room, coach's interview. What do you feel in regards to this football player moving forward? So he's a guy I want to keep an eye on. Deion Sims, I'm bringing back, and Willie Young. Quentin Demps and Marcus Cooper could stay. You're going to have plenty of money in regards to the cap. Mike Glennon is going to be gone. So how they work that, BG, and still manipulate the cap, you can come to an agreement with Kyle Fuller on a long-term deal and actually save money against the cap. So the cap is always fluid. It's one thing my uncle has always taught me. These guys in these business suits that are working money and working numbers have a way to manipulate that cap to get any player in the league under a contract and fit them under the cap with clever restructuring of other deals, making cuts. So money isn't an issue. Talent is. Marcus Wheaton, question mark, moving forward.
So news just broke a few hours ago that Jarvis Landry is now off the table as a free agent, having a franchise tag valued at about $16 million placed on him by the Dolphins. I know Landry was a polarizing player for a lot of Bears fans, but we got a question for you from the chat room now that he's no longer an option for us. Sean Ellis 1 says, with the top-tier free agent wide receivers being gone, does this make drafting a wide receiver in round 1 more pleasing, or do we continue to go BPA?
Well, that's a great question because we haven't gone to free agency. When you look at free agency, how coaching affected the talent. Look at Kendall Wright. For me, Kendall Wright, on the record, I don't lie, on the record, truthfully, I didn't think he was going to be what he was. I was surprised at his talent in the route tree and his ability to suction cup the football and go up and get balls. I mean, the catch he made in Baltimore. These things shouldn't go unnoticed. The continuity and the trust that he's gained with the quarterback is clear and evident that Mitch trusted this football player. To get him back, he's not the name and the talk all the time and all around, but how much of a difference does coaching and the offensive philosophy change that football player's production? To me, it will be night and day. That's on tape. He separates. On tape, he gets open. On tape, he catches. He did what he needed to do. So there's no need to panic in regards to Jarvis Landry. Now, Jarvis Landry loves the football player coming out of college, loved him in Miami. Disappointed that the Bears, whether they were or weren't going to get involved with him, didn't get the opportunity to. Because I think, unlike most people, that he's a game breaker. I don't care what he runs in the underwear Olympics. I care what he runs on tape in a game. And when I saw this football player, he's tremendous. But now you do have the draft. You do have that backing you up to what you're going to do in free agency. You got Cameron Meredith coming back, granted off an injury. There's an unknown in Kevin White. I just told you about Marcus Wheaton. Guys are running a 4.38 at Oregon State. Coach Mike Cavanaugh was the offensive line coach there when he was there. He had nothing but good things to say about this football player, a friend of mine. Now he's coaching the offensive line at Syracuse. Wheaton can make plays. When you saw him against Detroit, up in Detroit, 3rd and 17, 3rd and 18, he's running that deep in cut. That's where he thrives. This coaching staff had to be assessed by us appropriately. We weren't just talking crap. We're talking about not using personnel correctly, not using the talent appropriately, not helping Mitchell Trubisky with pre-snap reads and checks and run-pass options and spread, all of it, including your best player, Jordan Howard, and your best lineman and center, Cody Whitehair, moving around. This all happened. It's fact. It's history now, but it's fact. To now throw Wheaton off the track and worry about wide receivers. That Dontrell Inman you traded for, he came in here, he showed life in the system, and the same thing. These guys have to be assessed by the new staff, BG. I know there's a lot to tackle, but I look at the draft, my number one receiver, James Washington, Oklahoma State. Perfect fit in what Nagy wants to do. Perfect fit in what it is that he can do and bring to the table. How they trade down, how they manipulate the draft, that's going to be, but the first is going to be the free agency. How they handle the position. Do they re-sign Inman? Do they re-sign Kendall Wright? How do they handle these positions? Those things are going to be important. And there is a market still of receivers that are out there that I like, that can be system fits. And that's really what it's going to be. And Shane Marsaw, smartest man in the barroom, said it. Is there a real need for a number one wide receiver in the NFL? And when you look at these teams, you look at the Patriots, guys that get open, guys that make catches, Guys that move the chains are important.
Well, we are going to be talking about the cap and Bears decisions over the next couple of weeks and free agency on all our shows leading into March. But now I want to shift gears and talk about something that plagued the Bears last season, injuries. Last week it was announced we hired Jason Lascalzo as our new strength and conditioning coach. And someone who is very well versed in all things training and Bears is our guest, Ross Reed. Thanks for joining us tonight. You're most welcome. Barflies and listeners who don't know Ross, he's a featured contributor for 312 Sports, co-host of Mac and Reed, host of the Coffin Corner podcast, and also a personal trainer.
That's right. You got it right.
So how long have you been a personal trainer?
Close to a decade now.
Well,
you guys have to excuse my voice. I'm getting over a cold. I'm sorry.
I could tell, Ross. How you doing tonight, Ross?
Super hoarse, man. A long time, Phil. How you doing, buddy?
How you doing, brother? It's a long time no talk.
I know.
I'm glad we're rekindling the relationship on Bears Hour Live. Ross Reed in the house.
Absolutely. Happy to be here with you guys.
So when the news about Jason was announced, Ross, you seemed very excited and tweeted out the following. New strength and conditioning, Jason Lascalzo knows how to prep guys for working with Mike Leach. Conditioning will be a major emphasis. Smart hire. He preaches core strength, efficiency over volume, and specific player programs. Very different from the last group. So share with our listeners why you feel he's the right coach for the Bears.
Sure. So here's the thing, right? In order to talk about Jason first, I think you got to delve back into the past a little bit and talk about the past regime. And I obviously didn't know what went on in their strength and conditioning room, but from the enormous amount of soft tissue injuries that they had and muscle tears, it seemed like the Bears as a team had a kind of program put together for everybody on the team, right? Whether you're the 5'10" wide receiver or you're the 6'4" linebacker, it seemed like they were all doing the same program. And it also seemed like they were doing a very heavy volume based program. And that kind of thing that we preach in health and fitness is long gone, right? Like long gone are the days from Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the 80s and let's just bench press as many times as we can and get the hell out of here, or heavy squats or anything like that. You've got to be smarter with your approach to health and fitness. And here, is why the Bears bring in Jason, who's done a great job back with under Mike Leach's camp at Washington State. And, it fits what they want to do going forward, A, from keeping their team healthy to play a full 16 games, which we know has been a problem under John Fox in the past. And also, B, this team wants to play fast, right? They want to have that high octane spread coast offense, which means that your offensive players got to be well conditioned, but also means your defensive players have to be well conditioned too, because they're going to be on the field a whole lot more.
So Ross, you talking about this guy, he's coming in, you quoted him as saying that the strength is the keystone of the athletic performance. In my thought process, being strong prevents a lot of injuries. It's the catastrophic ones that you've got to train for, the ACL tears and everything. Do you think we can have a roster that remains healthy in 2018 with this guy coming in with what you're talking about, core strength and different program plans for positions as we're in reference?
Sure. Look, no one NFL roster stays, relatively healthy the entire year, right? Like, the Eagles had their issues and they still won the Super Bowl, and the Patriots had their issues as well. With that said, the Bears should be a lot healthier this year than they have been in past years. Like I said, Jason Lascalzo always preaches core strength, which is you have to have a strong core, number one, if you want to be a professional athlete. Number two, if you just want to be a strong person in general, like everything starts from your core base, right? And then from there, we talk about what are the key injuries that athletes normally get, in particular football players, right? They get a lot of torn ACLs. They get a lot of torn Achilles. They get a lot of torn pectoral muscles and biceps and triceps muscles. Well, in order to prevent those kind of injuries, you've got to be strong in those areas and also the parts surrounding the areas going forward, right? if you have strong ankles and you have strong quads, then you're less susceptible to tearing your ACL or tearing your Achilles. Your bicep is connected to your pectoral, muscle. Like all of this counts going forward. And also, these guys, they can't be overtrained as well, and that has to do with communication. When these guys leave at the end of the season, they're essentially on their own. They're with their own trainers or with their own off-season program. It's important that the strength and conditioning coach stays in communication with these players so that they know what the program is, going forward, that, both sides are on the same page. So by the time these guys show up to training camp, you don't have a Kevin White situation or an Alshon Jeffrey situation where he was dealing with all those soft, tissue injuries. Now, with that said, you'll still have your freak injuries, Kevin White falling on his collarbone. That's not really preventable. But, the Nick Kwiatkowski injuries from last year and the Jerrell Freeman injury and also the steroids thing, which is a completely other topic, those things should be preventable, and those things shouldn't happen going forward.
Let me ask you another question in regards to the sports science here. With the collective bargaining agreement being set up the way it is, do you think that tends to cause and force a lot of these injuries? Because a lot of blame went on the past strength coaches, the past two of them, and it seems like the dominoes are continuing to fall. I mean, some of this has to be luck, but do you think the CBA, with the lack of physical, in a collision sport, has something to do with this too?
Here's where I think the CBA kind of screws an NFL team, right? Like, you get less time with your players during the off season, which means they get more time to do things on their own. And these players on their own, I think, tend to be getting a little bit more trouble. And these athletes in the off season, I think they're working out too much. I think they're overtrained. I think by the time they show up to training camp, they have been busting their butts, working out 6 days a week. They haven't gotten any, ample rest time. That they show up to training camp like they've got 6 games underneath their belt. Like, they're overtrained. Take case in point, a rookie, right? A rookie will play an entire college football season. Then he has to play a bowl game. Then he gets to go to the Senior Bowl or the East-West Shrine Bowl or whatever, and then he has to show up to somebody's camp to prepare for the Combine, which is next week, and then he has to prepare for a pro day, and then he's got to prepare for a mini camp after the team drafts him, and then boom, training camp. Like, when did that kid ever rest? That kid is overtrained, and I think that's why you're seeing a lot of these injuries.
They call that the Kevin White syndrome now?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So we've got Frankie Myers in the chat room, Ross, and he shares that one of the conditioning programs that aided the Falcons in their Super Bowl run and allowed them to be one of the fewest injured teams in the league in 2016 was that they brought in Marine drill sergeants to better condition and unify their players. Thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Look, everybody has their own, their own style, their own way. I think the most important thing that you can get out of this going forward and what the new strength and conditioning coach can do is he has to listen to his players and he has to pay attention to his players, and not one player is built like the other guy, right? So you can't treat everybody the same. So yes, you can bring in a Marine strength and conditioning program, and that can help a lot of players, but you have to know when to dial back on a guy like a Kevin White, right, who might be a little bit more delicate than a guy like Danny Trevathan. I'm just throwing for example, or something like that. You have to know when to pick your spots with a guy like Cal Long. And versus you have to know, Cam Meredith is coming off of an ACL injury. I've got to strengthen his lower body a little bit more. You've got to be a little bit more player specific this time around and not be so cookie cutter, so to speak, when you're dealing with a full 53-man roster.
So part of the research I was doing on this guy had a lot of praise for him coming out of WSU, including the coaches he worked under. What impressed you so much about his time there?
What impressed me the most was, like you said, right, he's got a lot of people that vouch for him. I always find a college football strength and conditioning coach really impressive because in the NFL, you got 53 guys to work with, right? In a college football team, you've got over 100 guys to work with. That's a lot more different personalities. There's also young men. These are, guys under 21 years old. These are, they're barely not children anymore. But you still have to deal with that kind of mentality and deal with their growing bodies, so to speak. And what I've seen from everybody that says that they love him is that he has that kind of that confidence and communication in the weight room. Like, he owns the weight room. And that's what his job is, right? He's supposed to take command of that weight room and make sure that everybody's busting their butts and doing it as a team. And that's how everybody gets on the same page and gets good and stays healthy throughout the year.
So we got another question for you, Ross, from the chat room with Sean Ellis asking you, if you were the trainer for the Bears, who would you be most intrigued to train? And who do you think could benefit most by proper training besides Kevin White, of course?
Yeah, absolutely. I would probably love to get my hands on Tariq Cohen because he's just such a fascinating athlete, right? Like, he's so short and low to the ground, but people underestimate how strong and powerful he is, especially in his legs. So I would love to kind of get my hands on him and see what he can do in the weight room, because I think he's, the sky's the limit for that young man. You want to really increase his durability and strength, especially to be able to run through the tackles, because you want to kind of increase his load a little bit and maybe decrease Jordan Howard's load so that both guys are fresh throughout the season. In terms of the other question, I would probably look at a guy like Cal Fuller. If you keep him going forward, we don't know if the Bears are going to franchise him or sign him to a long-term deal or even let him walk. But I hope that he stays, number one. And I hope, number two, you don't want last year to be kind of an aberration, right? You want him to stay healthy, which he's had trouble doing in the past in his career. So you want to look at Cal Fuller's body and see how he moves and see how he recovers and see what could we tweak to make sure that he plays another 16 games this year and another 16 games after that, and so on and so forth going forward.
A lot of fans don't really know you, Ross, at Ross
Well,
Reed.
damn it, they should.
Exactly. Great dude. Good stuff all the time. Ross, you look at this roster. I know you have a athletic performance background, weightlifting, training, nutrition. They hired the girl from the Olympics to come in here and put these guys on specialized programs like a Leonard Floyd, for example. You look at this roster, Ross knows this roster backwards and forwards. He can come on the show anytime, talk X's and O's. I need you to look at this roster and assess one player that really needs a trainer to push them or to just embody them in the best way moving forward into 2018.
That's a good question. I would probably look at both of the offensive tackles, in my opinion, right? I think Charles Leno and Bobby Massey, both guys have potential. Both guys have a tendency to take plays off or get a little bit complacent. But I think with a little bit more push, a little bit more aggression, and a little more strength and balance, both guys can be, at least Leno can be a really good left tackle in this league, and Massey can be, better than average, which he's about an average guy right now.
So, Ross, we got one more question for you from Jerrell in the chat room. He says, how hard is it to tailor a workout to a single player versus a baseline team workout with 53? I know you mentioned it in college versus pros, but he's curious how hard it actually is.
It's not hard at all to tailor a workout for a single guy, right? What the hard part is making sure that guy stays on the program and he shows up to the gym every day, ready to put the work in. And then when you have to times that by 53, that's when your job gets hard, right? It's not about making sure that Mitchell Trubisky just busts his butt in the gym. He's likely going to do that, but you want to keep an eye on him. But you have to make sure that a guy like, Bryce Callahan does the same thing, right? Or Dontrell Inman or whoever. It can't just be the star players. It has to be guys 1 all the way through 53, right? If you think Tanner Gentry has potential and can be on the roster, then you want to see him bust his butt just as much as starting quarterback, does, because that'll only make Tanner Gentry better and make the team better.
The chat room's loving you tonight, Ross. Frankie Myers asks, what do you think about Leno's personal commitment to his body that he has been able to start all but 1 or 2 games so far in his career, especially when everyone else is dropping like flies?
Charles is durable, man. And, he goes out there and you don't really hear his name a lot during games, which is a good thing. I think Charles is missing that extra, like that third gear, so to speak. Like, he just needs to get a little bit more angry and more aggressive and be more willing to put guys on their butts. But, he's a good left tackle. He's not a great left tackle, but I think he just needs to kind of play with a little bit more of an edge, right? Like, if you put Cal Long's personality into Charles Leno, that's an all-pro left tackle.
All right, Ross, I want to switch gears with you now while we have you, because I know you've been vocal that you weren't sold on Landry and had some wise advice earlier tonight for Bears fans about not panicking quite yet. So who are you hoping that the Bears target to fill our wide receiver gaps?
Well, look, it's still really early, right? Like, you know, we know the names out there. Allen Robinson could be a free agent. Marquise Lee is likely to be a free agent. You've got guys like Jordan Matthews. I'm a big fan of Jordan Matthews. I think last year was just kind of, you know, a down year for him because he was on a really bad passing offense. But I think he's got potential. Here's a guy with the size and the speed. You know, he ran sub 4.5 40, so he fits well in Nagy's offense. We all know about Albert Wilson, who knows the system well. He could be a good fit. And you know, there are a lot of rookies too. You know, Phil talked about James Washington. He's a great wide receiver. I'm a big fan of Christian Kirk as well. He could be a good fit. And we don't even know who's going to get released yet, right? Like Denver's got to make a decision. If they want Kirk Cousins, I don't think they can hold on to Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas, right? There's going to be some other guys that we don't even know about out in the streets yet. I'll say this to Bears fans right now, right? Like, I know they might have wanted Landry. I wasn't a big fan at the price tag that he was probably going to come in at. But when you look at like the Los Angeles Rams, what they did last year, they got to the playoffs with Jared Goff, and the receivers were essentially Sammy Watkins, Robert Woods, and Cooper Kupp, right? Those were their best receivers. So you can put together a decent group of receivers to me with guys who you don't like, who aren't like big superstar names, right? Like, you know, who's going to be this year's Robert Woods? Who's going to be this year's, you know, Sammy Watkins? Like, it's up to Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy to kind of find those diamonds in the rough, so to speak. And I think they're out there.
Yeah, I got to agree with Ross here. We talked about it in 100 Proof. We've talked about it all offseason. You know, obviously for me, I don't agree with Ross about worrying about the money because I just thought Landry was a difference maker in regards to a guy that wants the goddamn football, wants to make a play. Those guys are hard to find. You see them in college, but when the NFL is a different game. The windows are tighter in the window. So you got to be able to catch the football and you got to be able to run after the catch. So when you look at free agency, you know, obviously I talked about this 4 weeks ago and Wilson from Kansas City knows the system, has a comfort level, would be epic in regards to a coach on the football field. But I don't know Wilson's personality. Is he going to take on that role? Is he going to be what they want in regards to a leader in the locker room? That matters. I talked about Kendall Wright. Coaching is a problem and was a problem here in Chicago. It's why you lost. It's not why you won. I can't think of a game they won because of coaching. I can only think of games they won because of a certain running back and a punt returner from North Carolina A&T. This is the reality of the tape, and a great defense that came to play every game, no matter what it was. So the receiver position, I'm not worried about. This draft is deep in receiver talent. Washington's my number one. It could be Ridley. It could be Christian Kirk, like he said, the kid from A&M. There's so many receivers that I can get into in regards to the draft, but we're going to wait on them. Look at free agency is going to be the path to the draft, essentially. I know they do the path to the draft on the NFL Network, but Ross, free agency sets the course to where you're going to pick 8 and how you're going to manipulate there. Are you going to trade back, get more picks? There's no pan. Like Ross said, what about Tavon Austin with the Rams? You know, he could be cut. Now all of a sudden he's on the market. This was a guy Bears fans loved coming out of the draft. I loved him. I wasn't going to pick him that high, but I loved the football player. Now he becomes a fit. He becomes a fit in this offensive philosophy. And we'll see, you know, that kind of, he got cut from his team. Does he come in with a chip on his shoulder? You know, you look at Terrell Pryor. This football player was a key. Everybody wanted to see him. He blew up. He was a quarterback. This kind of athlete comes into a system where you're scheming around him. You're teaching him. That's a game break. He's a field flipper. People could say whatever they want. What transpired in Washington, there wasn't semblance there. There's a quarterback that wants out. There's all this chaos going on. He's coming in new to the chaos. Players with talent you want. How they're going to assess these guys, even a kid, like an under-the-radar guy. Ross brought up Jordan Matthews, Ross. How about my boy Mike Campanaro?
Sure.
Coming out of Wake Forest. He almost single-handedly beat the Bears in Baltimore. You could put him in the slot.
Yeah, you could put Taylor Gabriel on that list too. Taylor Gabriel's guy from Atlanta.
Taylor Gabriel.
You got to talk about Trey Burton, the pass-catching tight end from Philadelphia, knows the offense well.
Yeah, there's so much that's going to transpire in regard. How about a Cody Lattimore? Doesn't fit there, goes to another team. In Denver, does he fit? Guys that come in, get new leases on life. There's still an unknown in Kevin White. I'll give you that. I believe in Cam Meredith. I will go on the record and tell you, just be ready. From what I've heard, Cam Meredith is going to be ready. So you be ready. And I'm telling you from a reliable source, Cam Meredith is going to be ready to attack this football season. I'm excited about that football player. I think they should bring Kendall Wright back, Ross. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely don't have a problem. Look, the more quality people that you have on your team, then the better it is. Make the head coach and the general manager have to make a tough decision at the last, final cuts day, right? That's what makes a good team. It's not the guys at the top, so to speak, but it's the depth that you have on the roster. So the more quality guys that you have at a position, the better your football team is.
Absolutely. So we have enough content between the two of you to fill a whole other Bears Hour Live, and we'll probably do that later in this off season. But I want to thank you for joining us tonight, Ross. It was great having you on, and hopefully you get to come back and chat with us again soon. Barflies, if you aren't already connected with Ross, as Phil shared, his handle is @RossReed.
Ross, thank you, man. Thank you so much for coming on and spreading the Bear love. It's happening, Ross. We're about to see where this new team is going to go under the direction of head coach Matt Nagy.
Absolutely. We'll talk soon, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Ross. Phil, before we wrap up the show, I want to share with Barflies that we've just built a new section at BearsBarroom.com called Draft Dr. Phil's Desirables. And there, Barflies can find the first 4 videos you made on the following draft prospects: Marcus Davenport, Maurice Hurst, James Washington, and Josh Jackson. Tell us one thing that drew you to each of those players.
Well, be on the lookout, BG. A little show teaser that I'm actually producing another video for tomorrow release at some point that'll go up in that site. And I'm excited about this Draft Dr. Phil's most desirables. I'm going to have to start ranking some of these Twitter follows that I have too and see if any of them should be desirable. My wife might get fired up, but yeah. You look at I finished my tease here. I'm going to be doing for my boy, the smartest man in the bar room, Tremaine Edmonds tape is going to come out tomorrow. All I can say is wow, and Shane's gonna make an appearance in the video, so look for that tomorrow to go in that at BearsBarroom.com. It's gonna be exciting. But when you look at these guys, Marcus Davenport first and foremost, I've talked about him earlier in the offseason. Aldo interviewed him at the Senior Bowl. Here's a kid from a smaller school of San Antonio, the Roadrunners, BG. This football player has length, just a talent that the traits that you want in a pass rusher is the one thing that I like about this football player if I'm going to play this fairly, because obviously I can go for 5 minutes on each of these guys, but Davenport's natural ability to rush the passer on top of his athleticism really makes him a standout to me, and I feel as though he's definitely in the conversation for GM Philatoshin at 8, because I feel like it's the biggest need and it's the hardest to find those pass rushers to quarterback. So that's why it's so important that you look for them. And there's a lot of them in this draft, but Davenport really stands out. Obviously, Chubb is going to be in there. I'm going to do a video on him. But my next guy, Maurice Hurst, I think he's my favorite player in this draft. And I'd say this, there's just my guy. There's those type of guys that just do everything technically right. And I just know and have a feeling like the kid Anderson, Henry Anderson, he went to the Colts. He was a my guy. He was my favorite player in that draft. And you look at what he did there. This football player, to me, though, he is so quick with hand placement and explosiveness off the snap. A lot of people are just going to throw him in as a 3 technique. And I'm talking about Maurice Hurst out of Michigan, that's where you're going to be prejudiced towards this football player. But I think he could play the 5. I think he could do a lot of different things, because where you look at Jonathan Bullard and his quickness, Maurice Hurst is in that category, but he's not a timed missile. He's not guessing snap count. He's just physically that quick. And there was a lot of question. I know Zeke, Barfly Zeke out there, Isaiah Robles, was asking me about Bullard, and it seems to be reality when it comes to his guessing snap counts and thus. But with Hurst, to me, there's no guessing. It's just natural born quickness. Aaron Donald has that. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Aaron Donald, but listen, this guy's going to go higher than people think he's going to go. I've been talking about him for 2 years now on tape. This guy is an absolute stud. I'm going to follow him. I don't know if the Bears will take him, but he's one of those guys that I'll see go to another team, and he'll end up being a major NFL star in Hurst. And then James Washington, I just love this receiver. Ridley, I think, is a better route runner. There's no doubt. We're apples and oranges now. There's just something about the big playability and the toughness and the physicality that this football player, James Washington, has that I absolutely adore. And I feel like there's a real good comparison to Tyreek Hill in Kansas City. That kind of ability to get deep in the NFL and flip the field. He's a guy that the Bears have to manipulate the draft, if they're going to take this football player, because I know for a fact he's one of those guys that's going to get into the NFL and be a superstar. I mean, he's got great suction cup hands, and I love that about that football player. I can go on for another 40 minutes on this guy because I believe in him that much. And then Josh Jackson, he compares to Kyle Fuller to me. He has eyes on the football, goes after it. Tape doesn't lie. He's not afraid to put his face in there. I love his ability to take the football away. There's a highlight, BG. Hopefully you got to see my latest video today at BearsBarroom.com on Josh Jackson. If you haven't seen it, go to BearsBarroom.com. Go into the Draft Dr. Phil's desirable section, folks, and go check out Josh Jackson. One-handed interception against Ohio State. It's absolutely mind-boggling. We used to joke, we put great athletes at corner that can't catch. And, today's NFL in a passing league, you look for the ability to do both. And Josh Jackson is a beast. I just absolutely love him. Number 1 corner in the draft, without a doubt in my mind. Take that to the bank, stamp it, pull this audio, play it all day tomorrow. Best corner in the draft, Josh Jackson.
Well, our chat room is as fired up tonight with as much passion as you and Ross have had, Phil. And here's what some of the barflies had to say. Sean Ellis 1 says, if this show went on for hours, we'd all listen. You guys keep it 100. Much love to you all. Unemployed John Fox returned tonight and said, hey, Phil, Jordan Howard can't catch. If he caught that ball against Atlanta game 1, Glennon, my boy, would still be quarterback, and I would still be coach. Bob Phelan reminds us that Fuller's block on Eddie Jackson's pick was sick too. The George U wants us to share with you a quote from Adam Schefter. Those who know Sue believe that playing in New York, Dallas, or Chicago has always appealed to him.
Oh my God. Can I say something about Sue?
You can.
I absolutely love that football player coming out in the draft. If that guy's mind is right, he could be a guy that just takes over games. And a lot of people don't realize he's such a great hand fighter that if you put him at that 5 technique opposite of Akeem Hicks, if he was to become free, you gotta look at that football player because he will come in with a chip on his shoulder. And as Schefter's quoting, and great stuff there, George, he wants to be here. That's what you want. And those type of football players can change the tide of a season.
One last chat room quote from AirJair. He says he really wants us to try and trend that hashtag, tag23. Friendly reminder that Bears 100 Proof will be out on Thursday this week with scheduled guest Adam Hogue. And don't forget to check out Phil's Jordan Howard video on BearsBarroom.com and retweet it to your followers. Let's try and get Mr. Undepreciated some appreciation. And if you don't follow Bears Hour Live on Twitter, why not? You can find us at Bears Hour Live and show us some love. Thanks to everyone for listening and interacting with us tonight. We love connecting with you every single week and love that you bring it 100%. Wraps up this edition of Bears Hour Live, and we will see you all next week.
Oh, yeah. Bringing that Bears Hour Live funk.
Only 3 minutes over. Look at that.
Hey, they want us to go longer.
They do.
With Shane not here, we should.
Make sure you subscribe to Bears Barroom Radio Network on iTunes, on Google+, on Podbean, any of those services. Just write in Bears Barroom Radio Network in their search bar and we should pop up, and tell your friends.